When a human warship returned, the galaxy trembled in fear. The galaxy was ancient, older than memory, older than light. Countless empires had risen and vanished, leaving behind only dust, ruins, and stories whispered through the void. But among all those stories there was one name spoken in fear, one word that made even the bravest captains hesitate before sleep. Humanity. To most it was just a myth now. A bedtime tale told to scare children or remind young soldiers that pride could destroy even the greatest of civilizations. Beware the humans, the elders said. They burned brighter than anyone's and vanished just as fast. Yet in a forgotten corner of the galaxy, where dying stars flickered like embers, an old sensor array suddenly woke. The alien crew of the Varnax Eye didn't expect anything unusual that night. They were explorers from the Dominion Armada, tasked with scanning the edges of unclaimed space, mapping ruins, and preparing new worlds for conquest. It was routine work, safe work, until the alarms began to hum. At first it was faint, just a ripple on the scanners, a ghost signal. The operator frowned, adjusting the controls. Probably interference, he muttered, but the signal grew stronger. The readings were wrong. Too large to be a fighter, too heavy to be a transport. Yet the signature didn't match any known vessel in the Dominion's database. The numbers danced across the screen, unstable, impossible. "Commander?" the operator called out, his voice trembling. "There's something out there." The commander approached, annoyed at first. Another false echo? Clear the static. But when he saw the readings, the blood drained from his face. The object was massive, larger than any warship the Dominion had ever built. Power levels spiked far beyond standard limits. The commander's second-in-command whispered, "That can't be real." Then the word appeared on the translation feed, just a single line of text flashing on the ancient monitor. Letters from a language thought long dead. Human. For a moment no one spoke. The hum of the ship's engines felt louder, heavier. The crew looked at one another in disbelief. Then nervous laughter filled the room. "It's an error," someone said. "A system glitch. Humans are extinct. Our ancestors destroyed them centuries ago." But the commander didn't laugh. His gaze remained locked on the dark void outside the viewport. Because in the distance, beyond the swirl of broken asteroids, a shadow was forming. Slowly, something vast began to emerge from the darkness. It wasn't a planet or a station. It was moving. The Varnax Eye zoomed in, focusing its long-range optics. The crew gasped. The ship was enormous, black as night, scarred by age, yet alive with faint blue light running along its hull like veins. Layers of metal armor overlapped like plates of an ancient beast. Massive towers and cannons stretched along its body, each one larger than an entire Dominion cruiser. "Identify it," the commander ordered, his voice tight. "Trying, sir," replied the technician, fingers trembling on the console. "The structure? It's not Dominion, not Union, not even Drakari design, it's—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "It's human architecture." The room went silent. The commander felt his throat tighten. "That's impossible," he whispered. Humanity was erased. But the ship was there. Undeniable. Real. It moved with quiet purpose like a predator that didn't need to show its teeth. Every sensor in the Varnax Eye trembled as power readings climbed higher. Communication? Channels buzzed with nervous chatter from nearby ships in the scout fleet. "Could it be a relic?" one officer asked. "A derelict?" "Then why is it moving?" another replied. The commander clenched his fists. He wanted to believe this was nothing, just an ancient wreck drifting through time. But deep down, he knew better. The legends had always said humanity's ships were different. They weren't machines. They were monsters, living weapons born from fire and fury. Outside, the colossal vessel drifted closer, its outline clearer with each second. Through the dust of centuries, faded symbols came into view, numbers, letters, and a name half buried by rust. The crew translated it slowly, each word falling like thunder, UNS Nemesis. The old stories flooded back. The Nemesis, the lost warship that vanished at the end of the human wars. The one said to have destroyed entire armadas before disappearing into the void. Now it had returned. The Varnak's eye tried to hail it, sending coded signals in a dozen languages. No response. The Nemesis continued its steady approach, silent and unbothered, its engines glowing like the heart of a dying star. Fear spread through the fleet like wildfire. Commanders argued across the comms. Some demanded to attack first, others whispered to retreat before it was too late. But no one could bring themselves to fire. It was as if the warship's silence alone had frozen their courage. The commander looked into the dark, his voice trembling. "One ship can't threaten the Dominion," he said, trying to convince himself. "We've conquered worlds, we've crushed rebellions. We are not afraid of ghosts." Yet deep inside he felt it, the primal terror of a predator long forgotten, because every legend said the same thing. When a human warship appeared, it didn't come to talk. It came to end wars. The shadow filled the screen now, blotting out the stars. The Varnak's eyes' alarms screamed warnings. Radiation spikes, weapon signatures, unknown energy surges. The commander's heart pounded. He gave one last order, his voice barely steady. "All ships, hold position." No one moved. No one breathed. The Nemesis glided past, immense and silent, casting a shadow that swallowed their fleet. Its hull shimmered, faintly, covered in scars from battles older than their empire, and as it passed, every ship's power flickered. The crew watched in awe, realizing the truth too late. The stories were not myths. Humanity had never been destroyed. They had been waiting. The Dominion scout fleet floated in uneasy silence. The Varnak's eye and its sister ships kept their sensors locked on the dark behemoth that had appeared from the void. Every reading they took made less sense than the last. The human warship, if that's truly what it was, did not match any design, any logic, any natural law of the known galaxy. Its engines burned without fuel. Its hull emitted no life signs. Yet somehow it pulsed with energy like a living creature. The faint glow beneath its armor throbbed in rhythm, like a heartbeat. Commander Tyrell gripped the rail beside his chair, eyes fixed on the screens. "Is it transmitting anything?" "Nothing, sir," his comm officer whispered. "No signals, no codes, no patterns. It's just watching." The commander frowned. Ships don't watch. And yet it felt like this one did. The Nemesis hung motionless in the void, its colossal frame eclipsing the nearest moon. For centuries, stories had called humanity the architects of chaos, the destroyers of gods and tyrants alike. But those were myths. Beautiful, terrifying myths. Every Dominion officer had heard them, but none had believed them until now. On the bridge, the crew whispered among themselves. Some prayed quietly to forgotten deities. Others stared, mesmerized, unable to look away. Suddenly, a sound echoed through the comms, a faint metallic thrum, deep and slow. It wasn't language. It wasn't a signal. It was breathing. The lights on the human ship flickered, and the Dominion fleet's sensors surged with interference. "Power fluctuation," shouted the engineer. "It's draining the local field." Before Tyrell could respond, every display in the room went black for half a heartbeat. When they came back online, the Nemesis had moved. Closer. Too close. "Distance closing. It's moving toward us." The commander's throat went dry. "Evasive pattern. Now." Engines roared to life as the scout fleet spread out, but the human warship didn't accelerate. It drifted forward in perfect silence, like gravity itself had chosen its path. And then came the whisper, faint, trembling, over every comm channel across the entire fleet. "You are trespassing." The voice was old, deep, and distinctly human. Every officer froze. Their language translators struggled to decode the tone, but the message was unmistakable. "Origin, unknown," said the communications officer, pale. "It's not from our system. The transmission, it's coming from everywhere." The commander stared into the void. "Everywhere?" "Yes, sir," the officer said. "Every frequency, every ship, even our private channels. It's inside the system. The fleet tightened formation. Fear rippled through the command channels. Some ships armed weapons, others began to pull back. "Stand your ground," Trell barked, his voice shaking. "It's a derelict, a relic. It cannot fight." But deep inside, he didn't believe it. The Nemesis stopped moving. It loomed ahead, silent again. Its hull shimmered as if alive, rivers of blue energy tracing along the metal like veins. Ancient markings began to glow beneath the scars. The Dominion's sensors couldn't read the language, but one symbol repeated again and again. A hand gripping a flame. The emblem of humanity. Tyrell's second-in-command whispered, "The old record said they were wiped out. Entire fleets burned their worlds. How could this be real?" Tyrell's voice was low. Maybe the records lied. Before anyone could answer, the ship's alarms screamed. "Something's building inside it," the weapons officer cried. "Energy spike, massive, beyond measurable scale." Across the fleet, captains shouted in panic. Some ordered retreat, others opened fire prematurely. Dozens of plasma bolts streaked through the void, striking the Nemesis head-on. The explosions lit up the darkness like a newborn sun. Then silence. As the light faded, the human warship drifted unchanged. Not a scratch, not a dent. It absorbed the assault like mist in a storm. The crew of the Varnixi stared in horror. How is that possible?" one whispered. The commander clenched his jaw. "Because it's not just a ship." His words hung in the air like prophecy. In the void beyond, the Nemesis began to hum. A low, deep vibration that rattled every hull and shook every heart. The crew covered their ears as static filled their minds, not just their comms. It wasn't sound anymore. It was presence. The legends were right. Humanity had built ships that were more than metal. They were willpower forged into steel, and this one was awake. The lights on the Nemesis brightened, cutting through the darkness like dawn. One by one, Dominion ships began to retreat without orders. Captains begged for guidance, their voices trembling. "What do we do, Commander?" Trell's hands shook as he stared at the monstrous silhouette on his screen. "We remember," he said quietly, "and we pray they've forgotten." But deep down, he already knew the truth. Humanity hadn't forgotten. They had returned. The Dominion armada had faced wars before. Rebellions, invasions, civil uprisings, but nothing like this. Nothing so quiet. Nothing so still. The Nemesis drifted before them, unmoving, unyielding, like a shadow carved out of the stars. Its silence was worse than any weapon. On every Dominion ship, fear had taken root. Officers shouted into broken comms, their words overlapping in chaos. No response from command. Weapons unresponsive. Shields flickering. Every voice carried the same edge, panic. And yet the Nemesis had not fired. Not once. It only watched. From his flagship, Commander Tyrell stared at the dark vessel. The legends of humanity came flooding back to him, the kind his teachers had dismissed as myth. They said human ships carried something no other species could replicate. Not just technology, but soul. That their warships didn't merely obey, they remembered. Now, staring into the cold glow of the Nemesis, Tyrell wondered if that was true. "Sir," whispered his lieutenant, "what if it's not a machine at all?" Tyrell turned slowly. "Explain," the young officer swallowed. "Look at its power readings. No engine output, no energy cycle. It's not drawing from matter or plasma. It's alive. Alive." The word echoed through the commander's mind. He felt a chill crawl down his spine. Then the lights dimmed. All across the armada, screens flickered as power began to drain. Ships lost navigation, targeting, even life support for a few terrifying seconds. It was as if something massive had reached into their systems and simply took. The Nemesis pulsed again, a single wave of energy that rippled through space. The Dominion ships drifted like leaves in its wake. "Energy surge increasing," shouted an engineer. "It's pulling charge from the void itself." The commander gritted his teeth. "That's impossible, sir." "It's doing it." The crew's voices cracked, their courage fracturing. The second-in-command turned pale. If it can feed from vacuum energy, then it can fight forever. And still the Nemesis did not attack. It didn't need to. Its presence alone had already broken them. From across the fleet came desperate chatter. "Retreat!" "It's toying with us." It wants us to fire first. But Tyrell said nothing. He simply stared at the monster in the dark. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. Transmit again. Every channel. Use old Earth dialects. Try anything. If someone is inside that thing, I want them to answer. The communications officer obeyed, sending bursts of light and sound across a dozen ancient frequencies. Minutes passed. No reply. Then, just as they were about to stop, the Nemesis answered. The voice that filled the room was calm. Too calm. It carried no anger, no emotion, only a cold certainty that froze every heart. You took what was ours. You thought time would bury us, but time remembers. The commander stepped forward. Who are you? Static. Then the same voice replied. We are the echo of what you erased. The transmission ended. No one moved. No one breathed. What? What does that mean? Whispered the lieutenant. The commander stared at the dying stars outside. It means the stories were right. In the distance, the Nemesis shifted. Its colossal hull began to split open, not from damage but by design. Panels unfolded, revealing inner layers that glowed with molten light. From within, hundreds of smaller shapes began to emerge, sleek triangular vessels, each one humming with silent precision. Multiple contacts, the sensor officer yelled. Launch signatures, dozens. No, hundreds. Tyrell felt his pulse race. Fighters? No, sir, the officer said. Not fighters. Ghosts. The smaller ships moved with terrifying grace, formations tighter than any Dominion unit could manage. They made no sound, no transmission, no visible propulsion. Just cold light and motion. The bridge fell silent. They were watching an army of the dead take flight. The Nemesis remained still, but its swarm spread outward, encircling the Dominion fleet. The commander realized the truth too late. This wasn't a show of force. It was a test. The humans were awake, and they were watching how fear would move through their enemies. Prepare all weapons, Trell shouted, breaking the paralysis. Defensive pattern Theta 5. But as his crew scrambled, the nearest ghost craft glided within range. It didn't fire. It simply passed by. Every Dominion system it crossed flickered and died, shields collapsing, weapons freezing, controls locking. Ships became blind, deaf, and helpless. What's happening? They're shutting us down, sir. Without even touching us. The commander slammed his fist against the console. They're reading us like open books. And as he said it, the fleet's screens went dark again. When they flickered back to life, a single image glowed across every ship, white text written in a language most of them didn't understand, but one every species instinctively felt. We are not gone. We are watching. For a long moment, no one spoke. No one moved. The commander's voice broke the silence. All units. Retreat now! The order spread, but no engines ignited. Because the Dominion Armada, for all its might, had realized the truth. They were no longer facing an enemy. They were standing in the presence of something far older, far angrier, and far more human than they had ever believed possible. The Dominion Armada was no longer a fleet. It was a collection of terrified ships adrift in chaos. The void that had once been their hunting ground now felt like a tomb. Thousands of officers stared into the abyss where the Nemesis waited, silent and unshaken. Its swarm of smaller crafts, the so-called Ghost, had stopped moving, forming a circle around the Dominion ships like vultures around a dying beast. Commander Tyrell stood frozen on his bridge, sweat dripping down the side of his face. The whispers across his ship had turned to panic. He could feel it, the slow collapse of discipline, the breaking of minds. Every officer had the same question clawing through their thoughts. How do you fight a ghost? Tyrell slammed his fist on the console. Pull yourselves together, he barked. We are the Dominion Armada. We are not afraid of myths. But his words sounded hollow even to himself. Sir, said his lieutenant softly, what if the myths were warnings? Tyrell turned sharply, glaring at him. Warnings? The young officer's eyes flicked to the screen. Every civilization that rose before us, every empire that disappeared without trace, they all came before the humans, didn't they? Tyrell said nothing. The truth sat heavy in the silence. The lieutenant continued, voice trembling. What if humanity didn't vanish because they were destroyed? What if they destroyed everyone else first? Before the commander could answer, the lights dimmed again. The hum of the Nemesis filled the void, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to pulse through the bones of every living being. Across the Armada, entire systems flickered out. Life support backups groaned. Engines failed. The void swallowed every sound except the steady heartbeat of the human ship. And then, it began to move slowly, deliberately. The Nemesis turned its massive frame toward the center of the Dominion formation. The movement was impossibly smooth, almost graceful, but the meaning was clear. It had chosen its target. All ships. Tyrell shouted, "Form up! Concentrate fire on the lead." Before he could finish, a bright flash erupted from one of the smaller human crafts. A single lance of white energy cut through the void and hit a Dominion cruiser square in the center. The ship didn't explode. It vanished. One moment it was there, alive with light and movement. The next, there was only a glowing cloud of dust where it had been. Gasps filled the bridge. "Direct hit," whispered the sensor officer. "Complete molecular disintegration. No debris, no survivors." The commander's heart dropped into his stomach. Another light flared, then another. Each one erased a ship in total silence. The Dominion armada began to fracture. Fleets that had once stood in perfect formation now scattered like frightened insects. "Hold position," Tyrell yelled, voice raw. "We can still fight." But his words were drowned out by screams over the comms. "They're everywhere." "We can't lock targets." "Our weapons won't fire." The smaller human ships weaved between Dominion vessels, moving faster than tracking systems could follow. They weren't attacking in rage. They were performing a ritual, precise, methodical, merciless. Each strike was clean. Each hit final. Tyrell gritted his teeth. "Bring main cannons online. Focus everything we have on that warship." Across the remaining fleet, hundreds of Dominion ships obeyed. Their weapons flared to life, releasing a storm of energy. The combined power of an empire surged toward the Nemesis. The darkness turned into day and then nothing. When the glare faded, the human warship still stood untouched. Smoke curled along its hull, glowing faintly blue as the energy absorbed into its body. Its guns began to move one by one like the slow awakening of a sleeping titan. The commander's voice cracked. "By the stars." The Nemesis fired once. A single cannon unleashed a wave that tore through space like the hand of a god. It didn't just hit the Dominion ships, it unmade them. Whole squadrons ceased to exist. Fleets that had spanned kilometers vanished from the grid in the blink of an eye. Every Dominion soldier felt it, the same cold realization spreading like poison. This wasn't war. It was cleansing. The voice returned, calm, human, and heavy with quiet judgment. "You built your empire on our bones. You thought silence meant surrender. Another beam of light, another fleet gone. You forgot who taught you fear." The Dominion armada screamed across the comms. "Retreat. All ships, retreat." Engines flared. Chaos erupted. Some ships turned to flee. Others rammed into one another trying to escape. It was madness, pure and absolute. The Nemesis did not pursue. It simply watched, towering in the void like a monument to vengeance. Inside the Varnak's eye, the commander sank into his chair, trembling. "Why?" he whispered to no one. "Why now?" The lieutenant looked at the fading lights of the enemy ships. "Maybe they were always here," he said, "watching us build the same cruelty they once fought." The commander closed his eyes. The last thing he saw on his dying screens was the silhouette of the Nemesis, its weapons dimming, its hull glowing faintly in the shape of an ancient symbol, a burning flame. Humanity hadn't returned to conquer. They had returned to remind the galaxy what fear truly meant. The void was burning. The Dominion armada, once a symbol of power that spanned across galaxies, had been reduced to drifting corpses of metal and flame. Where there had been tens of thousands of ships, now only fragments remained, silent, glowing ruins scattered among the stars. And yet, through that graveyard, the Nemesis moved untouched. It did not pursue. It did not gloat. It simply existed, an ancient presence that turned destruction into silence. On the bridge of the Varnak's eye, Commander Tyrell could barely stand. His hands trembled as he looked at the dying signals blinking off one by one on his screen. His voice was hoarse when he whispered, "How do you fight something that history forgot to kill?" No one answered. The survivors were broken, both in body and spirit. Across the comms, faint cries echoed. "Engines down. Shields failing. We've lost control." The sounds of dying crews filled the static. Tyrell shut his eyes. He had led fleets through wars that consumed entire systems, but this was not war. This was judgment. The Nemesis slowed its advance, and for the first time it transmitted again. The voice that came through was clearer now, human, calm, and terrifying in its restraint. "We remember the fires you started. We remember the silence that followed." The Dominion officers froze. The words carried through every ship, every channel, every heart. They didn't need translation. The meaning was universal. The lieutenant beside Tyrell swallowed hard. "They were waiting for this," he said. "They've been hiding, watching." All this time, Tyrell's eyes were distant. No, not hiding. He turned slowly toward the viewing screen. They were preparing. The human warship's lights shifted, pale blue turning to deep red. Along its hull, symbols glowed brighter. Names, numbers, fragments of a forgotten language etched into the metal like scars. The crew realized with horror that those markings weren't decoration. They were memorials. Each word was a name. "Each line a fallen world, sir," whispered the comm officer. "I think that ship carries the dead." As the Nemesis glided forward, a faint halo of light shimmered around it. For a moment, it looked almost peaceful, like a relic returning home. But then the ghost ships moved again. Hundreds of them formed into perfect formation, not an army now, but a message. They aligned into the shape of a single symbol, a burning flame surrounded by a circle. The old insignia of humanity's final alliance, the Soul Accord. The Dominion had erased that emblem from every archive centuries ago. Seeing it again was like seeing a ghost take form. The lieutenant whispered, "They shouldn't know that symbol. They shouldn't even remember us." But the humans had never forgotten. A new transmission pulsed through the void. The voice this time was softer, like someone speaking to themselves across time. "We warned you what would happen if you came here. We buried our dead among these stars, and still you came." The commander gritted his teeth. "They're using old recordings, some AI left behind." But even as he spoke, he knew he was lying. The human voice continued. "You built your empire over the ashes of our graves. You thought you could erase us. But the void does not forget, and neither do we." Then, silence again. Outside, the Dominion wreckage drifted slowly toward the Nemesis. Broken ships collided softly, pulled by unseen currents as if the void itself bowed to the ancient warship. "Sir," the lieutenant's voice cracked. "It's not over. Look at the scanners." Across the black horizon, more signals began to appear. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. Each one carried the same energy signature, the same pulse as the Nemesis. The Dominion survivors watched in paralyzed horror as the readings filled the entire screen. Ghost ships were emerging from every corner of the system, some large as planets, others small as fighters, all moving with perfect coordination. The human fleet had not returned, it had awakened. Trell staggered back, unable to breathe. "This isn't a ship," he said quietly. "It's a graveyard, and the graves are rising." The Nemesis pulsed once more, sending one last message before the void erupted in light. "This galaxy forgot what we are. We will remind it." And then, silence again. The Dominion ships turned, desperate to flee. But the light from the human fleet was already spreading, washing across the darkness like dawn breaking over the ruins of an empire. For the first time in thousands of years, the galaxy remembered the sound of humanity's return. It wasn't a roar. It was a whisper. Steady, relentless, eternal. Humanity remembers. The stars themselves seemed to dim as the human fleet awakened. One by one, the ancient ships of the Soul Accord came to life. Massive, towering silhouettes rising from the dark like sleeping gods opening their eyes. Each vessel glowed faintly with red and white energy, their hulls scarred by centuries yet still impossibly intact. The Dominion survivors could barely comprehend what they were seeing. Hundreds of ships, no, thousands, drifting out from the void, their movements synchronized, their silence heavier than thunder. No transmissions, no threats, only that single, unshakable presence spreading through space like an old truth rediscovered. On the bridge of the Varnak's Eye, the surviving officers watched their scanners overload. I can't count them," one stammered. "Every time I try to read the signal, more appear. They're everywhere." Commander Tyrell's hand shook on the command rail. His once proud voice was now only a whisper. "This can't be real. No species survives extinction." His lieutenant looked at him, pale and wide-eyed. Maybe extinction was just the beginning. The Nemesis led the fleet's slow advance, the symbol of the burning flame now burning brighter across its hull. Its energy readings dwarfed everything the Dominion had ever recorded. It moved like it was part of the universe itself, an ancient, unstoppable rhythm. Then, for the first time, the human fleet spoke together. Not in sound, but in resonance. The communication wasn't carried on radio, but through space itself. The Dominion ships felt the message before they understood it. We were not erased. We were waiting. The air on every Dominion bridge seemed to vibrate as if the words had weight. Some soldiers screamed. Others fell silent, tears in their eyes, unable to comprehend the enormity of what they were witnessing. Trell steadied himself. "Open a channel," he whispered. "Anything. I need to talk to them." The comm officer hesitated. "Sir, they're not using our frequencies. I don't care." "Send everything. All bands, all languages. 1,000 Dominion survivors transmitted at once, pleas, apologies, surrender codes, desperate prayers." The void swallowed them all. No reply. And then, from the heart of the Nemesis, a single voice emerged, clearer than before, quieter than death. "You came to conquer." "We came to remember." Trell stepped forward, shaking his head. "You can't blame us for what our ancestors did. That war never ended." The reply cut through him like a blade. Outside, the human fleet shifted formation. Massive energy signatures began to build. The Nemesis cannons rotated into position, glowing white-hot. The lieutenant shouted, "They're charging weapons! Raise shields!" Trell barked instinctively, even though he knew it was useless, but the attack never came. Instead, the human ships released a pulse of pure light. It wasn't destructive. It wasn't even physical. It was something deeper. Every Dominion system, engines, comms, sensors went dead. Total silence. Even the hum of power was gone. Then the screens came alive again, but now they displayed images, old ones, cities burning. Worlds turned to ash, fleets of human warships fighting impossible odds against alien empires. Trell watched as billions died in a war the Dominion had erased from history. "We begged for peace," said the human voice. "You offered us fire." The images changed again. Human survivors retreating into the darkness of space, their final message carved into steel before vanishing into exile. "If we fall as one. And when we rise together." The Dominion officers stared speechless. Trell whispered, "All this time, they were watching us rebuild their destruction." The Nemesis pulsed once and the ghostly images faded. The human fleet's weapons dimmed, returning to their silent glow. "We do not seek vengeance," the voice said, "but every empire must learn what it once forgot." A beam of light spread from the Nemesis across the void, passing through the remains of the Dominion ships. Instead of destroying them, it simply stopped them, frozen mid-space, powerless. "You will live," said the voice, "to carry the message." And with that, the fleet turned. Thousands of human ships began to move as one, vanishing back into the endless black. The stars brightened again as they passed, like the universe itself exhaled. On the bridge of the Varnak's Eye, the lieutenant stared in disbelief. "They're leaving us?" Trell's voice was hollow. "No, they've already done what they came to do." Outside, the last of the human ships disappeared into hyperspace. The void was empty again, except for the wreckage of the Dominion's arrogance and a single message blinking on every remaining console. "Tell them we remember." Trell sank into his chair, staring at those words as they faded from the screen. In the silence that followed, every survivor felt the same cold truth settle over them. Humanity had not returned to conquer. They had returned to remind the galaxy that even death could not silence their will. And somewhere beyond the reach of stars, the Nemesis and her ghost fleet vanished once more, leaving behind only the echo of their promise. Humanity remembers. And this time the galaxy will too. For 3 days the void remained silent. No transmissions, no movement, only the floating corpses of what had once been the proud Dominion armada. Billions of tons of shattered steel drifting through the black. The wreckage formed a scar across the stars, a wound in the galaxy that would never heal. From the edge of that graveyard, the Varnak's Eye drifted powerless. Fires had gone out. Voices had fallen quiet. Only a handful of survivors remained, sitting in the cold glow of their dying instruments. The engines were gone. The shields were dust, And yet something deeper had been broken, their belief that they were untouchable. Commander Terrell sat alone on the bridge, staring into the void where the Nemesis had disappeared. His uniform was torn, his eyes hollow, his mind still trying to comprehend what he had witnessed. He could still hear the echo of that human voice, calm and ancient, whispering through his thoughts like a prayer carved into his bones. "We do not forget." Around him the crew whispered in the dark. No one spoke of victory. No one spoke of survival, only fear, a kind of fear older than logic, one that reached back through memory to a time when the galaxy was still young, and humanity had been the storm that reshaped it. A faint signal flickered on the console. The comms officer gasped. "Sir, incoming transmission." Terrell turned slowly. "From where?" The officer hesitated. "Everywhere." The signal wasn't coming from one ship or one system. It was echoing across the Dominion's entire network, bouncing through their satellites, colonies, and military archives. It was rewriting itself into their systems. The language was old, human, yet every being who saw it understood what it meant. On every screen, across every surviving world, the same message appeared: "We are awake." And then, beneath it, two words that turned courage into silence: "Humanity remembers." The survivors stared in horror as the transmission expanded. The message wasn't just appearing on military systems, it was spreading through trade networks, news relays, and civilian channels. Within hours, every corner of the Dominion would see it. Every species that had once mocked the legend would know the truth. They were back. Trell rose to his feet, his voice shaking. "Turn it off." "We can't," the officer cried. "It's not a message, it's part of the data stream now. It's rewriting our cores." And as they watched helplessly, another image appeared on the screen, a symbol of a burning flame surrounded by a ring of stars. The emblem of the Soul Accord. Beneath it, the faint outline of the Nemesis appeared once more, distant and fading into the dark. But this time, something new accompanied it. A sound, a heartbeat, slow, deep, human. It pulsed through the systems, through the walls, through every living being who saw it. Not a threat, not a weapon. A reminder. The Dominion survivors fell to their knees. Some wept, others prayed. For the first time in centuries, the most powerful empire in the galaxy bowed its head to ghosts. The transmission ended as suddenly as it had begun. The screens went black. The heartbeat stopped. Only silence remained. Terrell sank into his chair, his voice barely a whisper. "We thought they were gone." His lieutenant, pale and shaking, replied softly, "No one ever truly leaves when they have something to remember." The commander looked out at the stars one last time. Then the galaxy will never know peace again. Far beyond their reach in the endless dark between galaxies, the Nemesis drifted once more. Its hull glowed faintly beneath layers of rust and starlight. The names carved into its armor shimmered like constellations. Inside, the old warship slept, not dead, not forgotten, but waiting. Deep within its silent heart, an AI voice spoke softly to no one but the stars. Signal confirmed. Memory restored. Awaiting orders, a pause. Then another voice, human, weary but alive, answered. "Stand by, Nemesis. There's still work to do." The ship's engines rumbled faintly, the sound lost to the vacuum. Its lights dimmed, leaving behind only the faint glow of that eternal emblem, the hand holding fire. Across the galaxy, whispers began to spread. The stories returned. The myths reborn. Children would grow up hearing them again, the tales of the species that defied extinction, that burned brighter than any empire and refused to die. And somewhere, beyond the veil of known space, the last words of the ancient transmission continued to echo between the stars, carried by signals older than empires. Humanity does not fade. Humanity does not forgive. Humanity remembers. The stars trembled. And the galaxy, once proud and unchallenged, finally remembered what fear felt like.